You've probably by now seen the news that the US Secret Service shut down some massive cell phone network that could have taken down all of New York's cell systems during the United Nations General Assembly. Now that sounds like a really crazy headline, but what does it actually mean? And is that actually the case? Now the answer is super interesting, but also not what you might expect. Now here's a picture of some of these systems that they were able to shut down. Now what this is a SIM card farm. Now think about how your cell phone works. If you have a physical SIM card, you put your SIM card into your cell phone and that gives your cell phone a phone number. Now if you have a multi-SIM card cell phone, you can have two phone numbers in the same phone. Now if you wanted to have access to tens, hundreds or thousands of phone numbers all at the same time, then you would probably go out and buy one of these devices. Now what this device does is, depending on its capacity, it could be in the tens or hundreds or thousands of SIM cards, is it's like having that many phones bunched together with that many SIM cards. And then what it does is it routes all of this over the internet. Now think of it a bit like Google Voice. Google Voice allows you to use your phone to make calls and texts via a virtual phone number. But when services like Google Voice and Skype already exist, what's the purpose of something like this? Well, these systems are actually usually run by criminals. So rather than having to use your real name and credit card and tie your phone number to your Google Voice account, a service like this would allow you to buy access to 1, 10, 100, 1,000 phone numbers completely anonymously, likely paid via cryptocurrency. Now, who would use these services? Well, their appeal is actually really broad. And when I say really broad, I mean it. Now, one of the biggest problems with cell phones is that they're constantly in communication with cell towers. You probably heard of terms like triangulation. And that's because your cell phone is bouncing off multiple towers near you at any given moment, which means all of those towers can work together to pinpoint your exact location, which means you're essentially walking around with a GPS tracker in your pocket, which if you're doing crime is probably not a great idea. So these services appeal from anyone to swatters, scammers, spammers, drug dealers, cartel members, spies. They are really very useful for anyone who wants an anonymous phone number. So this system was most likely a service. Now the Secret Service actually published a couple of different photos. These smaller operations look like they could just be run by some kind of crime group, whereas this massive one probably has access to hundreds of thousands of SIM cards. It is almost certainly some kind of service that actually sells the phone numbers to third parties. So you're probably wondering, well, what does this have to do with taking down New York's cell network or the UN General Assembly? And the answer is, well, probably nothing. Let me explain. So essentially what I was able to gather from the details released by the Secret Service, it looks like they were chasing down a threat made to a high-profile politician. Now the Secret Service's job is protecting high-profile politicians. So if one of them were to receive a threatening phone call or text, they would go and trace that phone number. But because of the way these systems work, they actually wouldn't be able to. Essentially what these systems do is they connect to the cell towers for you, and then they route the phone calls and texts via the internet to anywhere in the world. So someone could connect into the system via a VPN or proxy, send a bunch of texts and phone calls, and that would trace back to the SIM farm rather than to them. So if someone had sent a threat through one of these systems, then when the Secret Service went to track down the phone number, they would have tracked down the SIM farm rather than the actual perpetrator. So it looks like they might have stumbled across a couple of different SIM farms while investigating a couple of different threats. Now, the article is really weird. It's usually the media that overhypes things like this, but I actually read the original Secret Service press release, and the media is actually just citing them verbatim. These were all claims that the Secret Service themselves made, and the article is pretty convoluted. It starts with the claim that this system could have taken down the entirety of New York's cell network during the UN General Assembly, and then it says it was nation states and the cartel and and terrorists and scammers and spammers. And it's like, either this is the world's biggest combination McDonald's, Taco Bell, Burger King crime organization, or they just stumbled upon a service provider who just leases anonymous phone numbers to whoever wants them, in which case the network would most likely be being used by terrorists and cartel members and drug dealers and spies and spammers and scammers. So the most likely story is they really just busted some random SIM farm, but that's not at all interesting. If they were to go out there and say, hey, we found one of 100,000 SIM farms dotted across the world, probably no one would care. It would not have made national news. It would be a cybersecurity or a tech news story that someone like me might read and go, oh, that's kind of interesting, I guess. But since they found it and it coincided with the United Nations General Assembly, they decided to way overplay the story. Now, I spoke to a couple of different experts who actually cast doubt on whether this system would physically have the capability to take offline New York's cell network. New York is incredibly dense. It has thousands and thousands of phones in any given location at any given time. Think about the New Year's Eve ball drop. You have possibly 1 million or more people all in Times Square at the same time. That is way more cell phones than this device actually has. They estimated it had up to 100,000 SIM cards, which is 100,000 cell phones, whereas in Times Square there could have been 1 million. So it's very unlikely that a device with this low capacity would actually be able to overwhelm New York's cell network. Essentially, most likely the telecom providers would block the numbers if they were to spam too many messages at the same time. And the fact that all of these devices are in the same physical location, there would be a lot of radio interference where they would basically just interfere with each other, and they'd be more likely to jam their own network than the actual cell network. Now let's assume for a minute that this device could actually overwhelm cell towers, again because all of the devices are in the same location and phones talk to nearby cell towers. It would just overwhelm the cell towers in the immediate vicinity, knocking out cellular communications for anyone nearby. It would not, however, take offline all of New York's cell network. Now, they also mentioned that these different farms were found in a 35-mile radius of the UN General Assembly, which is huge. That is 3 different states. It could have been located anywhere in one of 3 different states, not even in New York. So it's kind of a non-story. Now, a piece of media literacy that I always like to teach is look for the word could, because could implies a capability, not an intent. I could physically set myself on fire right now. I have the capability to do that, but it is not something I would ever do. Similarly, if you're running a multi-million-dollar anonymous cell phone provider, you could maybe take offline some of the cell network, but why would you want to blow up your entire business model for no apparent reason? If CNN was to right now post an article saying Marcus Hutchins could set himself on fire, that kind of implies that this is at least something I'm considering doing. No one would read that article thinking, well, physically I could also set myself on fire, but why would I do that? They would immediately think, oh, that was a real risk, which seems to be what happened here. They basically made a huge article out of a nothing burger and got the entire press spun up out of their minds. And I've spoken now to several security executives who are actually very upset because stories like these, they spin up CISOs, they spin up security teams, and suddenly you've got all your clients calling you like, oh my God, are our phones about to go down? Is New York under attack? And the answer to all of those questions is no. It just seems like for whatever reason the Secret Service decided to overhype their press release. But anyway, that's all I have for today. Unfortunately, there is no world-ending cell phone apocalypse. It's quite a boring story, but I hope you learned something about SIM farms because they are actually quite interesting. And if you receive a lot of spam calls from different phone numbers or scams or phishing, those are probably coming out of farms very similar to this one. So it's likely they did actually put a big dent in a lot of spam, but they haven't saved the world from the cell network destroying terrorist organization that definitely 100% exists.